Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling probably the biggest question for any CISO or security leader out there.
Yeah, how do you actually prove that all this money, all this effort we're pouring into defense is actually working?
Exactly. It's not enough to just have a security program anymore. You have to be able to measure it, test its limits, and really quantify its value back to the business.
It's a huge shift. For years, security was sort of this black box. It was a cost center, and you just hoped your investment was enough.
You just crossed your fingers.
Right. But modern cybersecurity has completely flipped that on its head. We have to move from just being reactive to a posture that's proactive, that's structured by real standards, and is constantly being validated by aggressive testing. We need proof, measurable proof of resilience.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to connect that entire cycle for you. We'll start with the high-level governance frameworks, the things that tell us what good security should look like.
And then we'll link that directly to the operational metrics, the numbers that tell us how quickly we can actually recover from an incident.
And from there, we dive into the offensive side penetration testing, red teaming, the methods that validate if our defenses would, actually hold up against a sophisticated attacker.
We've gone through a huge stack of sources for this one. I mean, everything from the foundational requirements in ISO 27001 to the really granular application-specific stuff in the OWASP ASVS.
All the way through to the hard numbers, like mean time to contain, and then into the really fun stuff, the advanced lateral movement tactics that APTs love to use.
And we'll even touch on the emerging and, frankly, slightly terrifying role of AI in offensive security.
So it's the full picture.
Yeah.
Strategy, defense, offense, measurement, and of course the human factor, which is always the wild card. We're diving into how the best organizations are actually measuring success.
Absolutely. And before we jump into those definitive standards, we really want to give a massive thank you to our sponsor. This whole deep dive is brought to you by www.cisomarketplace.services.
They're all about helping organizations align their security strategy with their business objectives and making sure you're tracking the right metrics to prove that value. So definitely check them out. Okay, so let's start with the foundation, the bedrock. When a CISO is staring at this mountain of defensive tasks, the starting point has to be structure. And that's what cybersecurity frameworks provide.
They're completely non-negotiable for modern risk management. I mean, they're what moves an organization from just doing ad hoc security things.
Putting out fires.
Putting out fires, exactly.
Yeah.
Frameworks give you a systematic, repeatable approach to managing risks. So whether you're using something like the NIST CSF, which is really flexible and risk-focused, or ISO 27001.
Which is more of a global standard, right?
Right. It establishes an internationally recognized information security management system, or an ISMS. The real benefit of all of them, though, is consistency. They make sure security isn't just one team's problem in a silo, but that it's actually baked into the operational DNA of the entire business.
And the benefits today seem to be really heavily weighted toward that external perception, market trust. It's not just an internal checklist anymore, is it?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the global supply chain. If you're a vendor, just being able to show you here doing a comprehensive framework, and even better, that you're certified. Like with ISO 27001, that builds immediate trust with your customers.
It's part of their due diligence. They have to ask.
They have to. And ISO 27001 is really focused on that classic CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But maybe more importantly, it forces you into a cycle of continuous review. It makes sure your security posture doesn't just get stale and outdated.
Beyond those big global standards, though, a lot of organizations are facing this nightmare of overlapping mandatory compliance frameworks just based on their industry.
That's just the reality of doing business today. I mean, if you're a high-growth SaaS provider, your customers are going to demand you have a SOC2 report. And that report mandates controls across 5 areas: security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. For healthcare, it's IPA. You have to get IP right, or the fines are they're astronomical. It's all about protecting patient medical records.
And then there's the one that everyone who deals with payments knows and fears, PCI DSS.
PCI DSS is a beast. It is entirely focused on one thing: securing card payment data. And it's not optional. If you process, store, or even just transmit cardholder data, you have to comply.
It's notoriously granular.
Unbelievably so. It has 12 main requirements, but those are broken down into 277 sub-requirements. It's a massive effort. But meeting those standards is how you quantify avoided risk. The cost of non-compliance, both in fines and just reputational damage, is what justifies that effort.
So looking ahead a bit, we're starting to see new frameworks pop up that are designed to solve problems that traditional ones don't really cover, like OCSF, the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework. What's the problem that's trying to solve?
OCSF is tackling what a lot of analysts call integration hell. Right now, every single security vendor, your endpoint tool, your firewall, your SIEM, they all use their own proprietary log format, their own taxonomy.
Which makes investigations a nightmare.
A painful, slow nightmare. Your analysts are wasting critical time just translating and normalizing logs from different vendors to try and correlate a single alert.
And that's time you just don't have when an attacker is already inside your network, moving around.
Precisely. The whole point of OCSF is to create a common, standardized data model for all security logs and alerts. If everyone speaks the same language, so to speak, then tools can ingest and process that data way faster.
So your analysts can get straight to the investigation.
Exactly. The data is instantly normalized. And this isn't just some minor technical improvement. It's a massive efficiency gain that directly lowers your mean time to detect, which is a metric we're going to talk about in a bit.
Okay, so let's move from that high-level organizational governance down to the code itself, to application-specific defense. And for that, we have to talk about the gold standard, the OWASP Application Security Verification Standard, or ASVS.
ASVS is it's pretty much the definitive list of requirements for secure software. It's used by everyone in the lifecycle. You've got architects using it to design systems, developers using it to set up their pipelines, testers using it to verify the final product, and even consumers or businesses using it to evaluate the security of a vendor's application. It guarantees that your apps aren't just compliant on paper, but are actually built and tested securely from the ground up.
And the latest version, 4.0.3, seems like a really huge step forward because it finally acknowledges how much development has changed.
Yeah.
We're not just building simple monolithic apps on a single server anymore.
That shift is profound. The standard explicitly recognizes the modern world of APIs, cloud functions, containers, CI/CD pipelines. It moves the focus away from old-school server-side controls and demands security measures that are actually tailored for these new, highly distributed, and often ephemeral architectures.
So it's not trying to apply 20-year-old rules to serverless functions.
Exactly. It understands that if you're building with serverless, you have unique authentication and state management challenges, and your verification standard has to reflect that.
Now, to help organizations manage all this, ASVS breaks it down into 3 levels of assurance. Let's walk through those because this is where companies often need to make some tough decisions.
Absolutely. So it starts with level 1. This is described as low assurance or the bare minimum. Every single application, no matter what it does, should meet level 1.
So this is table stakes.
It's table stakes. It's designed to defend against the easy-to-find, common vulnerabilities. Think, the stuff you see on the OWASP top 10 list every year. The key thing about L1 is that its requirements are generally fully testable by a penetration tester or an automated tool without needing access to the source code.
Okay, so let me push on that a little bit. If level 1 can be entirely tested by automated tools, doesn't that make it a pretty weak standard against a determined human attacker?
That's an excellent point, and the answer is yes,
Yeah.
It is. L1 is absolutely necessary, but it is rarely sufficient. It's there to guard against the low-hanging fruit, the script kiddies, the casual attackers. For any application that handles anything of value, L1 is just the starting line.
It proves you're not making the really obvious mistakes.
Exactly, but it doesn't confirm your architecture is sound, and it won't stop an APT.
Which, of course, brings us to level 2.
Right. Level 2 is for sensitive data. This is the level that OWASP recommends for most applications, especially anything that handles sensitive PII, financial data, or really any significant business transaction.
And this requires more than just an external scan.
Oh, much more. Achieving L2 demands much deeper security reviews. You're talking about giving testers access to design documents, architecture diagrams, and doing source code reviews to ensure security isn't just on the surface but is built into the core logic.
And then there's the highest bar, level 3.
Level 3 is for high assurance or critical applications. This is reserved for systems where a compromise would be catastrophic. Think high-value financial trading platforms, critical infrastructure controls, or systems handling extremely sensitive medical data.
So this is maximum effort.
Maximum effort. L3 requires the absolute deepest security architecture review you can imagine. You need rigorous evidence for every single requirement. It's a complete end-to-end life cycle security validation. It's for applications that demand the absolute highest level of trust.
Let's zoom in on a few of the specific architectural requirements that make ASVS so powerful, starting with access control in section V1.4.1.
This one highlights probably the most fundamental rule of application security. It says access controls must be enforced on trusted enforcement points.
So on the server side.
On the server side, on your servers, your gateways, your firewalls, your serverless functions. The source material is adamant on this. The architecture can never rely on client-side controls.
Because anything on the client can be bypassed.
Trivial to bypass. If the user's web browser or their mobile app is what's deciding if they have permission to see something, your security is already broken. This is so critical in modern API-heavy apps where every single API request has to be re-authenticated and reauthorized on the server.
Okay, what about handling secrets? That's gotten so much more complicated with distributed cloud environments. That's in V1.6, right?
Yeah. V1.6 focuses on cryptographic architecture. The mandate here is crystal clear. All of your key material, passwords, API tokens, they have to be protected using specialized services like a key management service or a secure vault. And access has to be API-based.
The challenge there is managing the life cycle of those keys, isn't it?
It is, especially in serverless where functions spin up and down in seconds. Your architecture has to have a clear, automated process for rotating keys and re-encrypting sensitive data. And the standard gives this really blunt warning. Treat all client-side secrets, any key or token you store in the browser, as inherently insecure. Assume it's been compromised.
And finally, V1.14 on configuration architecture, which really looks at how security keeps up with the crazy pace of modern DevOps.
This is where DevSecOps really comes to life. V1.14 mandates that your build pipeline has to have automated steps to build and verify a secure deployment. This is especially true for infrastructure as code. You can't have a human manually reviewing thousands of lines of Terraform or CloudFormation every single time.
You need automation to check the policies.
You need automation to confirm that security policies are being enforced. And critically, it says deployments must use sandboxing, containerization, or network isolation to create boundaries. The idea is, if an attacker breaches one container, they should be delayed or stopped from moving laterally to the next application. It's about baking defense in depth into the architecture itself.
So we've laid out the rules, the frameworks. Now we need to move from that strategy to accountability. Before we dive into how we measure a success, just a quick shout out.
Yeah, if all this talk about implementing these complex, multi-layered frameworks and standards sounds, well, a bit daunting, remember that expert help can make all the difference. We really recommend checking out www.cisomarketplace.services for professional guidance on aligning your security program with your business goals.
All right, moving into section 2. We're shifting gears now from these theoretical standards to hard, cold data. For a CISO, metrics are everything. They're how you justify your budget, quantify risk, and most importantly, measure the real-world capability of your security team.
These are the numbers that demonstrate resilience. The ROI on your security spending is proven by how quickly you can shrink the attacker's dwell time. That window of time from the initial compromise to when you contain it, that is the most expensive and dangerous interval for any business. #tag 2.1 core incident response metrics.
So let's start with the metrics that are all about the speed of response. First up, mean time to detect, or MTTD.
MTTD is simple. The clock starts the second an incident begins, and it stops the second your system generates an alert about it. If this number is high, it's a direct signal that your detection mechanisms are failing you. Your logs, your SIEM rules, your endpoint sensors, they're just too slow.
And reducing MTTD is everything, because every minute that an adversary goes undetected
Is another minute they have for reconnaissance, for lateral movement, for getting deeper into your network and closer to your data.
Okay, so the system flags an alert, now the human element kicks in. That brings us to mean time to acknowledge, MTTA.
Right. MTTA measures the time between that alert firing and a security analyst actually picking it up and starting to work on it. Now, if your MTTA is high, it doesn't always mean your people are slow.
It usually means they're drowning in alerts.
Exactly. It's a classic signal of alert fatigue. Your alert volume is too high, or your triage and prioritization process is broken. Your analysts are wading through a sea of noise and they're missing the critical signals. A high MTTA points directly to an operational failure that you need to go fix.
And then we have the metric that really measures the outcome of that whole defense effort, mean time to recovery, MTTR.
MTPR is the time it takes to get an affected system back to a fully operational, clean state after an incident. This is a crucial business continuity metric. A low MTTR shows you have mature disaster recovery plans, good backups, solid processes.
And if it spikes?
If your MTTR suddenly spikes on an incident, that's a huge red flag. It tells you something in your recovery process failed, and you need to do a root cause analysis to figure out why restoration took so much longer than it was supposed to.
But there's one metric that seems to be the most holistic, the one that gives the best overall picture of team performance, and that's mean time to contain, MTTC.
I'd argue MTTC is the most valuable of all these time-to metrics, because containment means you've stopped the bleeding, you've prevented the incident from spreading laterally or escalating further.
It's the end of the immediate crisis.
Right. And if your MTTC is high, it gives you a clear mandate to drill down into the entire incident life cycle. Was our detection too slow? That's MTTD. Was our response delayed? That's MTTA. Or was our technical ability to actually quarantine a system or revoke credentials just not effective? MTTC points you to the weakest link in your entire operational chain.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second on these metrics. Doesn't an overfocus on, say, reducing MTTR sometimes incentivize teams to do quick Band-Aid fixes instead of addressing the deeper architectural root cause, the fix that's more expensive and time-consuming?
That is a fundamentally critical tension in security operations. You've hit the nail on the head. Yes, chasing a low MTTR above all else can absolutely prioritize just getting the service back online over deep, meaningful remediation.
So what's the solution?
A mature security organization needs a second set of metrics. You need to track the resolution time for the root cause, separate from the immediate operational recovery. You need both speed and architectural hygiene. If you're consistently hitting a great MTTR, but you keep getting hit by the exact same type of incident over and over again, you've optimized for the wrong thing. Hashtag TAG 2.2 third-party and compliance metrics.
Now, so much of an organization's resilience is tied up in their supply chain, in their cloud vendors. So our resilience is linked to theirs. How do we measure a vendor's security posture?
We have to use external metrics, things like system availability and SLA compliance. System availability, usually you see it as a percentage, everyone's chasing the 5 nines, is a direct measure of their reliability.
A vendor that can maintain 99.999% availability is showing you something.
They're showing you they have incredible operational maturity and probably very rapid incident containment, especially against things like DDoS attacks that are designed to take services offline.
And then SLA compliance takes that technical performance and turns it into a legal and financial assessment.
Precisely. The service level agreement is the contract. You have to be constantly comparing your vendor's actual availability and their MTTR against what they promised you in that contract.
And if they fail?
Failure to meet those SLAs should trigger service credits, or in a worst-case scenario, it gives you grounds to terminate the contract. This is a hard, tangible metric for vendor risk management. If a critical cloud partner consistently fails their MTTR commitment, you know their internal incident response process is broken, and you have to treat that as a risk to your own business. Hashtag TAG 2.3 quantifying security ROI, return on investment.
This brings us to the hardest conversation the CISO ever has, the one about ROI. Security is largely the art of proving a negative, right? Showing the value of a crisis that didn't happen. How do you quantify that for the CFO?
You have to shift the conversation away from cost and toward risk mitigation and business enablement. The quantifiable benefits are things like avoided compliance penalties and the direct cost savings from breaches that you prevented. We show how our investment reduces the probability of a catastrophic financial loss.
Which leads right into the breach risk calculation.
Yes. We can use a formula, and this is often part of larger quantitative risk frameworks like FAIR, to actually put a dollar value on risk. The formula is breach risk in dollars equals the breach likelihood as a percentage, multiplied by the breach impact in dollars.
So you get a real financial number for your exposure.
You do. And then when you go ask for, say, $50,000 for a new detection system, you can calculate the ROI by showing how that investment reduces the breach likelihood percentage, which in turn directly reduces your exposure in dollar terms. That's a language the board understands.
So when we invest in something proactive, like penetration testing, which can be expensive, how do we prove the ongoing value of that?
The ROI of a pen test is measured by how effectively and quickly you fix what the testers find. The number one KPI there is the mean time to resolve vulnerabilities.
So another MTTR, but for vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And your organization needs to have aggressive internal SLAs for this. For example, critical flaws have to be fixed in 7 days, highs in 14. This proves your remediation process is efficient.
And that distinction is so important because the attacker's clock is ticking way faster than most companies realize.
It's a massive, massive vulnerability window. Our sources show that while the average development team might take over 200 days to get a patch out, a critical vulnerability can be weaponized by attackers in a terrifyingly short amount of time, sometimes as little as 8 days after it's publicly disclosed.
So you're in a race.
You are in a race, and tracking your vulnerability MTTR against that 8-day attacker timeline shows whether your security program is even in the game.
What other KPIs can show that your testing program is maturing over time?
You should track the open to remediated ratio. This is basically backlog management. Are we finding new problems faster than we're fixing the old ones? If that ratio starts creeping up, you have a resource gap or a process problem.
And you can also track trends.
Yes, vulnerability density trends. So the number of vulnerabilities found per app or per 1,000 lines of code over time. If you're testing continuously and that density number is going down, that is hard proof that your developers are learning, your security architecture is improving, and your testing program is delivering real value.
We've set up the defenses, we've figured out how to measure them. Now it's time to leave the comfortable world of metrics and step into the mind of the adversary to see what we're really up against.
Okay, so put yourself in the attacker's shoes. You've gained initial access. Maybe you got it through a phishing email, a compromised laptop, whatever. That's just the first step. You haven't hit the jackpot yet.
You're not at the crown jewels.
Not even close. The next phase, and this is the phase that really dictates how bad a breach is going to be, is lateral movement. Hashtag 3.1, defining lateral movement and adversary goals.
So let's define lateral movement and explain why it's so fundamental to an attacker's success.
Lateral movement is the collection of strategies and technical methods that criminals use to move horizontally through a network after they've established that initial foothold. They use this time to explore the network, elevate their privileges, and hunt for the valuable targets, the credentials, the databases, the critical control systems.
And this slow, methodical movement is the signature of the most dangerous threat actors out there.
It absolutely defines an advanced persistent threat, or APT. APTs want to stay hidden for months, even years. They move slowly, silently, mapping everything. It's also critical for modern ransomware gangs who need to spread to as many endpoints and servers as possible to maximize their leverage.
And for espionage, it's the whole game.
For cyber espionage, it's everything. It's the core process they use to find and quietly exfiltrate sensitive intellectual property over long periods. Hashtag 3.2 key lateral movement techniques.
Let's get into the mechanics here, especially the attacks that exploit these old legacy authentication protocols that are they're still everywhere in big enterprise networks because of Active Directory.
And attackers love them for that exact reason. They target cached credentials and authentication tokens. First up is pass the hash, or PTH.
This one is classic.
It's a classic. Instead of trying to crack a password hash to get the plaintext password, the attacker just steals the hash itself right out of memory or off the disk. Then they use that hash to authenticate to other servers.
So they just bypass the need for the password entirely.
They bypass it completely. This works because a lot of legacy Windows systems were designed to just accept the hash for validation, and the vulnerability is often enabled by these old, poorly managed service accounts that have the same password across dozens of systems.
Okay, so what's the difference between that and pass the ticket?
Pass the ticket, or PTT, is basically the Kerberos equivalent. Instead of a password hash, the attacker steals a Kerberos ticket, either a ticket granting ticket or a service ticket. These tickets are valid authentication tokens. So by stealing one, the attacker can just impersonate the user and access services all over the domain.
And then there's Kerberosting, which I've heard is particularly sneaky.
It's incredibly stealthy and very effective. With Kerberosting, the attacker requests a service ticket for a specific service account from the Kerberos server. That ticket comes back encrypted with the service account's password hash.
And the attacker takes that offline.
Takes it offline, and then they can use all the computing power they want to crack that hash and reveal the service account's plaintext password. What makes it so sneaky is that it doesn't require administrator rights to request the ticket, and since the cracking is offline, it doesn't trigger any account lockout policies. It's very hard to detect.
So a lot of these attacks are successful because they're exploiting these old but necessary trust mechanisms that are just too difficult to rip out of a huge company's network.
That is the core challenge. You can't just switch off Active Directory. You have to lock it down meticulously. And attackers will also just use legitimate remote access tools.
Like RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol.
RDP is the perfect example. It's a legitimate tool for admins, but attackers with stolen credentials will use it to log in remotely to other machines and move laterally. This is why strong authentication, especially MFA, even for internal connections, is so critical.
And then we get to the master class of hiding in plain sight. Living off the land.
This is the technique that gives defenders nightmares. The hacker uses tools that are already present on the system. They use PowerShell, WMI, scheduled tasks. They don't need to drop any external malware.
So their activity just looks like normal admin work.
It looks completely legitimate to most of your standard security tools. It blends into the normal operational noise of the network, making it exceptionally difficult to detect.
Are there any simpler methods that still work?
Oh, yeah. Simple brute force attacks still work against accounts with weak passwords. We also see sophisticated social engineering, where an attacker uses a compromised email account to launch an internal phishing campaign. That bypasses a lot of your external email filters. And PowerShell is it's a constant threat in Windows environments for running malicious scripts. #tag 3.3 defensive measures against lateral movement.
Okay, so if the adversary is built to move, then our defense has to be built to create friction and isolation at every single turn. What are the key modern defenses against this?
Your defense has to start with the assumption that an initial breach is inevitable. So first, microsegmentation.
So breaking up the flat network.
Exactly. Instead of one big flat network where everything can talk to everything, you divide the network into tiny isolated zones using internal firewalls or logical access controls. The key benefit is limiting the blast radius. If one server gets compromised, the attacker is trapped in that small segment. They can't just easily jump over to your critical database server.
The challenge there is managing all those policies, right?
Yeah.
It can get complex.
It can get very complex, which is why automation is key. The second big defense is figuring out how to spot those subtle changes in behavior when an attacker is living off the land.
And for that, we use User and Entity Behavior Analytics, or UEBA.
Exactly. UEBA systems use machine learning to build a mathematical baseline of what is normal for every user, every server, every device on your network. Then they flag the anomalies.
Like a login at 3 a.m. from a weird location.
Or a user who suddenly starts accessing huge volumes of files they've never touched before. Or an admin account accessing a system from a user's workstation. These are the faint signals of lateral movement.
And this analysis is often structured using the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Why is that framework so important for modern defense?
MITRE ATT&CK is like the Rosetta Stone for attacker behavior. It gives security teams a common, standardized language to describe and classify threats. It breaks down what attackers do into 14 tactics, the why, like lateral movement, and over 200 techniques, the how, like pass the hash.
So it turns a generic alert into actionable intelligence.
Precisely. When a UE-based system flags an anomaly, mapping it to an ATT&CK technique allows the security team to immediately understand the attacker's probable intent, which dramatically speeds up the response.
And finally, to make that response happen even faster, we bring in automation.
That's where security orchestration, automation, and response, or SR, comes in. SR platforms ingest all these alerts from your SIEM and your UEBA, and they automate the low-level responses. They can automatically isolate an infected machine, disable a compromised account, and manage the entire response playbook. The goal is real-time mitigation, stopping that lateral movement before it can succeed.
We've covered the defensive structure, the metrics, and the attacker's playbook. Before we move on to how organizations can proactively test all of this, just want to take a moment for a quick reminder.
Yeah, if you're looking for some high-quality gear that sort of celebrates this whole security mindset, don't forget that our new merch drop is available right now, and you can get a 25% Black Friday discount over at securitybydesign.store. Go check it out and show some support.
All right, so offensive security, professionally simulating an attack. This really feels like the ultimate way to validate your defense. It takes you past the theoretical and into tested, proven reality. Why has this become so essential?
Because defense, at its core, is fundamentally reactive. You're waiting for something to happen. Offensive security, through things like penetration testing and red teaming, gives you proactive intelligence. It forces you to find your own blind spots.
This is an honest assessment.
It's the only way to get a truly honest assessment of your overall security posture and to see if your incident response plan actually works when the pressure is on. #tag 4.1, defining offensive security and related disciplines.
Let's clarify the difference between the two main disciplines difference here.
Yeah.
Pen testing and red teaming. People often use them interchangeably, but they're very different.
They're related, but yeah, very distinct. A penetration test is a controlled, scoped exercise.
Yep.
The goal is purely technical. Find as many vulnerabilities as you can within a defined boundary, like a web app or a network segment. It's about depth over breadth.
And red teaming.
Red teaming is a full, comprehensive attack simulation. The goal there is strategic. It's to assess the overall resilience of the entire organization, the tech, the people, the processes against a persistent threat. A red team will use any vector they can, including physical break-ins and social engineering, to achieve a specific objective, like stealing a confidential document. It mimics a real-world APT operation.
So when do organizations typically bring in external pen testers?
They should be doing it regularly. It's mandatory for a lot of compliance standards like PCI DSS. But you should also do one anytime you have a major change to your attack surface, like when you adopt a new cloud service after a big network upgrade, or definitely after a security breach to make sure the hole is actually plugged.
#ATT&CK 4.2, the penetration testing process, 7 phases.
Pen testing isn't just random hacking. It follows a very standardized, rigorous methodology. Let's break down those 7 phases. Right, it's a scientific process. It starts with phase 1, reconnaissance. This is the intelligence gathering phase. The tester is using open source intelligence, or OSINT, to find public information domain registrations, employee names from LinkedIn, email addresses for phishing.
Just seeing what's out there.
Just seeing what's publicly available. Then comes phase 2, scanning. This is where they go from passive to active. They're using tools like Nmap to map your network, find live hosts, see what ports are open and what software versions are running. They're looking for potential entry points.
And phase 3 is when they try to use one of those entry points.
Phase 3 is gaining access, the exploitation phase. They'll use a discovered vulnerability, a weak password, an unpatched server, and use a framework like Metasploit to deliver a payload and get that initial foothold.
Then what?
Then they try to pivot. They repeat the process on internal machines. And that leads to phase 4, maintaining access. Here, the tester tries to establish persistence in the environment. They'll install a backdoor or create a covert tunnel so they can get back in, even if the initial exploit gets patched. It simulates what an APT would do.
Phase 5 is about being sneaky.
Phase 5 is covering tracks. A good tester will try to erase any evidence of their compromise. They'll clear logs, modify audit trails. It makes the simulation more realistic.
And then comes the most important part for the business.
Absolutely. Phase 6 is reporting. This is the deliverable. A detailed report that documents every single vulnerability, classifies its risk level, and provides clear, actionable recommendations for how to fix it.
And it doesn't end there.
It can't. Phase 7 is remediation and retesting. The client organization fixes the issues based on their risk appetite and those MTTR SLAs we talked about. Then, the tester comes back and does a retest to confirm that the fix actually worked and didn't introduce any new problems. #TAC 4.3 penetration testing focus areas and tools.
So what are the common targets in a typical external network pen test?
They're looking at anything that's accessible from the public internet. So that includes your email systems, auditing configurations, looking for spoofing vulnerabilities. They'll hit your perimeter devices, your firewalls and routers, checking for weak policies or outdated software.
And web servers, I assume, are a huge target.
A primary target. Web servers and services are scanned for client-side exploits, poor patching, and misconfigurations. It's one of the most common ways in.
Now that cloud has totally changed this game. Cloud penetration testing is its own highly specialized field now.
Oh, completely. Cloud testing is less about network ports and much more about configuration and identity. Testers are looking at unique risks in AWS, Azure, and Kubernetes.
What kind of risks?
Things like attacking serverless functions, finding excessive permissions in your infrastructure as code templates before they even get deployed, testing your CI/CD pipeline for injection flaws, and critically, trying to exploit privilege escalation vectors through cloud identity services like AWS IAM. A single misconfigured S3 bucket can lead to a total compromise.
And what are the tools of the trade for this?
The foundation for most testers is the Kali Linux operating system. It comes preloaded with hundreds of security tools. The core ones are Nmap for scanning, Metasploit for exploitation, Nessus for automated vulnerability scanning, and Burp Suite, which is absolutely essential for testing web applications. #TAC 4.4, the role of AI in penetration testing.
And this is where things start to get really wild. Researchers are now looking at how large language models, LLMs, can automate this entire process, basically creating an AI auto-attacker. What are the key components that make this possible?
This is a massive shift in threat capability. The goal is to give an AI the ability to think like a human attacker, but at machine speed and scale. The first component is using agent systems.
Breaking the problem down.
Exactly. You give the LLM specialized agents. A planner agent figures out the high-level strategy. A summarizer agent keeps track of what's been discovered. And a navigator agent actually executes the code and interacts with the target system, learning as it goes.
And it's guided by that MITRE ATT&CK framework we mentioned earlier.
Yes, the ATT&CK framework acts as the AI's internal logic tree. It gives the LLM a comprehensive menu of tactics and techniques to choose from based on the current situation, which lets it move from scanning to exploitation incredibly fast.
And the third piece is giving it memory or experience.
Right. That's Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RBAG. You augment the LLM with a curated knowledge base, an experience database full of past exploits, common misconfigurations, and security tool manuals. When the AI hits a wall, it queries this database for ideas, just like a human tester would search Google, but way faster.
So instead of a human spending days mapping a network,
Yeah.
an LLM using this system could potentially find a vulnerability, write a custom exploit for it, and establish persistence in, what, hours?
Minutes. That's the terrifying potential. The sheer speed and scalability of AI-driven exploitation is going to raise the threat bar for everyone. That 8-day window of vulnerability we talked about, AI could shrink that down to almost zero.
That level of automation brings us to our final and maybe most important layer of defense.
It does. And before we get to that human element, just a final reminder that if you're enjoying this deep dive, you can show your support by visiting securitybydesign.store and grabbing some of our new merch. Don't forget that 25% Black Friday discount. So we can implement the best frameworks in the world, measure the sharpest metrics, run the most sophisticated red teams. But the single greatest point of failure in any security program is, and always will be, the human being.
And attackers know this. It's why social engineering is still the most common and cost-effective way to get that initial breach. Hashtag tag 5.1, defining the insider threat. When we talk about the insider threat, I think most people picture a disgruntled employee trying to sabotage the company. But the reality is much broader, and often it's just accidental.
That is such a crucial distinction to make. The insider threat is anyone who has or had authorized access. That's employees, contractors, partners, anyone. And we categorize them based on intent.
First, the accidental type.
The unintentional insider threat. This is just negligence or human error. It's an employee who misplaces a company laptop, or who accidentally shares a sensitive file with the wrong permissions, or who falls for a simple phishing scam. This type accounts for the vast majority of insider incidents.
And then there's the malicious type.
The malicious insider threat. This is deliberate, intentional harm. It's motivated by financial gain, revenge, corporate espionage. These actors often know the systems intimately, and they will actively try to cover their tracks by deleting audit logs or using legitimate tools to steal data quietly over time.
But the impact, regardless of the intent, is the same. A potential compromise of your data and your systems. Hashtag tag 5.2, mitigating insider threats through policy and access control.
So your mitigation strategy has to start with structural policies and controls that just assume a malicious or negligent actor could gain access at any time. The foundation of all of this is the principle of least privilege, or POLP.
Right. Only give people the absolute minimum access they need to do their jobs.
The absolute minimum, period. This is often hard to implement in practice, but it's essential for managing insider risk.
Why is it so crucial?
Because it limits the potential damage. If an attacker compromises a standard user's account, POLP is what prevents them from performing vertical privilege escalation, jumping from a regular user to an administrator. It also limits horizontal movement. If someone in accounting gets compromised, POLP should prevent them from being able to access the HR servers.
And for really high-stakes, critical tasks.
For those, you use two-person integrity, or TPI. It's also called separation of duties. This system requires two authorized people to be present and authenticate before a critical action can happen, like deploying a major code change or accessing the company's master cryptographic keys. It prevents any single person from acting alone on high-impact tasks.
And all of this has to be backed up by constant monitoring.
It's useless without it. You can have robust policies for employee screening and offboarding, but you need strict audits. This is where your security information and event management, or SIEM system, is critical. It monitors and logs every user action, and it's what you use to correlate activity and detect unusual behavior that might signal a POLP violation or a malicious insider at work.
Policies are one thing, but how do you actually test if your people and your processes are going to hold up in the real world.
You have to run social engineering assessments. You simulate realistic multi-vector attacks that are designed specifically to test that human factor. And this goes way beyond just sending a fake email.
So what are the different types?
Well, there's phishing assessments, which are the most common, simulating deceptive emails. But then you have vishing assessments.
Voice phishing.
Exactly. Phone-based social engineering. A security expert will pose as someone trusted, like IT support or a senior executive, to try and trick an employee into giving up a password or an MFA code.
There's also smithing.
Yep, smishing assessments use fraudulent text messages, pretending to be a bank or a delivery service to get people to click a malicious link. And then there's physical assessments.
You mean actually trying to break into the building?
Yes, evaluating your vulnerability to unauthorized physical access. Using tactics like tailgating, just following an authorized person through a secure door, or even dumpster diving to find improperly thrown out documents that could be used in a later digital attack. #tag 5.4 phishing simulation best practices. Learning over punishment.
The cultural approach to these simulations seems to be the most important part. All the experts stress that the goal has to be learning, not punishment. Why is that so vital?
Because punishment absolutely destroys your security culture. If an employee is afraid they'll be disciplined for clicking on a simulated phishing link, they will be far less likely to report a real malicious email because they'll be afraid of admitting they made a mistake.
Which creates a huge blind spot for the security team.
A massive blind spot. You lose all those critical early warnings. You have to create a culture of psychological safety where reporting is seen as a good thing, something to be rewarded.
So if clicks aren't the main metric you're tracking, what is the win condition for these simulations?
Reporting has to be the primary metric. That's the win. You track the reporting rate, what percentage of employees correctly identified and reported the simulation and the time to report. The click rate is just a secondary data point. Your North Star metrics prove that your training program is successfully turning your employees into an active human sensor network for the organization.
And how should companies structure these tests to be effective without just causing fatigue?
You need a reasonable cadence. A monthly baseline is good, but you should only increase the frequency for specific high-risk groups, like new hires or teams that have been repeatedly vulnerable, and the scenarios have to be realistic and ethical.
Right, no panic bait.
No panic bait. Avoid scenarios about layoffs or medical scares or problems with their personal bank accounts. Those just cause real trauma and they erode trust. You should focus on realistic business email compromise and credential harvesting scenarios.
And what about when an employee does fail the test? How do you handle that remediation to make sure they actually learn from it?
The feedback loop is everything. The worst thing you can do is assign them a mandatory hour-long remedial training course that they have to take weeks later. The best practice is to deliver instant, concise educational feedback, a micro lesson, immediately after they fail.
So the click takes them to a landing page.
Exactly. A positive landing page that clearly and simply explains the specific social engineering tricks that were used in that particular email. That immediate contextual learning is what improves retention and morale. It's so much more effective than delayed punitive training.
We have covered a huge amount of ground today. We've really completed that full circle from high-level strategic governance all the way down to the individual human response.
And I think we've established that modern security isn't just a collection of isolated tools and controls. It's a continuous, measurable, and highly dynamic operational cycle.
So let's try to synthesize the key takeaways from this whole deep dive. #outro.
We started with the absolute necessity of structured frameworks. Things like ISO 27001, NIST, and especially the detailed requirements in the OWASP ASVS. These are what formalize how you build resilient architecture and really move defense into the modern era of cloud and containers.
Then we moved on to how you quantify that strategy, using operational metrics like MTTD and MTTC. We stress that your security program's value is proven not just by the breaches you stop, but by how quickly you can contain and recover from the ones you don't, and using things like the breach risk calculation to actually justify that investment to the business.
From there, we shifted our whole perspective to the adversary's playbook. We dissected those sophisticated lateral movement techniques like pass the hash and curb roasting, which exploit legacy systems. And knowing that playbook is what forces organizations to implement those critical layered defenses like microsegmentation and UEBA, all structured around the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
And finally, we saw how proactive testing, pen tests, and red teams is absolutely essential for validating all those technical controls. And how the most critical element today is managing the human factor through ethical, learning-focused simulations where reporting, not clicking, is the ultimate measure of victory.
Which leaves us with one final thought for you to carry forward. Too often, security is still viewed strictly as a cost, a necessary expense to avoid fines or penalties. But the real value proposition of advanced security, the kind that's formalized by frameworks and validated by testing, is its role as a fundamental business enabler.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
I mean, strong security ensures business continuity, it enhances your global reputation, it can even reduce your insurance premiums. And most importantly, it significantly increases the trust that your customers and your partners have in you. Security is not a cost center. It is the ultimate investment in the future viability of your entire organization.
That is the essential insight to leave with. Our thanks once again to our sponsor, www.cisomarketplace.services, for supporting this deep dive into resilience and measurement.
And remember, you can pick up our new merch drop right now with a 25% Black Friday discount over at securitybydesign.store.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.